Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing well. It's been a couple of weeks since you've seen me, and that was because of my horrible stinky cold that I came down with, that I had the last time you saw me. Yeah, it took 2 weeks for me to get that cold completely out my system. It was horrible. I did think at one point I could have had COVID, but negative tests over multiple days proved that yeah, it was just a really nasty cold bug that I came down with, and yeah, it's gone, it's out my system. I am all good now. So yeah, over the past couple of weeks I've been trying to shift that bug that I had, and I've also gotten into listening to the podcast Uncanny. I know I'm 3 years late, but there we go. Oh no, 2 years late, because it's 2021 when it started, so 2 years late. But yeah, I love it. I've listened to it all the way through, and I'm listening to it through again. I just, yeah, absolutely fell head over heels in love with that podcast. And funnily enough, I had a meeting in Bristol on Tuesday, and I just happened to just casually mention that I was listening to it, and the guy sat opposite me said, "My family are on one of those episodes," and we started talking about it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm the little boy that got flipped out of bed in the middle of the night." And I was like, what are the odds? What are the odds that when I am listening to this podcast, I'm actually meeting someone whose story is a part of that podcast, and I never would have known had I not mentioned it. It was bizarre. It was a really, really bizarre encounter. But yeah, it was yeah, interesting day in Bristol that day. But anyway, I've also been, what have I been doing? Oh, I finished watching Foyle's War, so yay, got through all that. They were absolutely brilliant. Really recommend watching those. And I've got into watching the US version of Ghosts as well, because I love the comedy Ghosts, the BBC comedy, which very, very sadly the very, 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 very last episode is going to be on Christmas Day, and I'm just, it's going to make me sad, but I love it so much. So I started watching the US one, and at first I hated it because I adore the UK one so much, and they changed so much. It was just, now I absolutely love it. It's really weird. I've gone from hating it to loving it very quickly. So yeah, I've been watching that, and there's loads of other stuff I need to watch and everything. So build up to Christmas is going to be my time to catch up on all this stuff that I've missed. Like I haven't watched the third series of Only Murders in the Building yet. So yeah, I need to watch that. Anyway, apart from that, I have been reading Death by Shakespeare by Catherine Harkup in over these past couple of weeks, and I'm here to talk about it. So Death by Shakespeare is a non-fiction book which looks at the works of Shakespeare and basically talks about all the different ways that the characters in all of his plays die, whether on stage or off stage, and talks about what knowledge did Shakespeare have of these things at the time that he wrote these plays. Is there actual scientific evidence that you can die from these various ways? Now obviously, like stabbing someone through the heart or whatever, that's a given. That's a given. But like with Hamlet, there's the very famous thing that the king, who appears as a ghost in Hamlet, died because it was revealed by his ghost that poison was poured into his ear as he was asleep out in the garden, and that killed him. So scientifically, can that actually kill you? So Catherine takes all the different deaths and all the different plays, kind of groups them into categories, and those categories are each of the chapters in this book. So she looks at poison, she looks at murder, she looks at disease, etc., and talks about all of the different ways that Shakespeare wrote about death. And also, this is not just talking about the deaths and the science and such, it also follows Shakespeare's life. Very funnily, I was reading this yesterday, and afternoon hit, lunchtime hit, and I was like, you know what, I need to have a break from reading this. I'm going to put on this BBC documentary that has been made, and this it was called Shakespeare, Life of a Genius. Sorry, the title just completely flew out of my head then. And it has been made because at the moment it's Shakespeare season on the BBC, which they always do this time of year, because obviously it has now passed, because as I said, I'm like weeks behind, and the anniversary of Shakespeare's birth and death. And so every year the BBC puts on a load of Shakespeare related stuff, which you can access through iPlayer and various programs on all of their various channels. And they especially made this documentary. It's sort of a docudrama, but it's mainly documentary style, talking about Shakespeare's life in London. And it says at the very beginning, there is a lot of stuff that we don't know about him. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. Like 7 years of his life, we have nothing, but we can learn things from what was going on in London at the time, such as, diseases and, all that going on, and what he was publishing in his plays at the same time. And can that reveal things? And there's historians, there's various actors and writers and such who come together, who are being interviewed, who make up this documentary. It's really, really great. And funnily enough, I was like, right, I need to take a break from this book, just over lunch, while I have lunch. I'm going to watch this documentary. It's 3 parts, by the way, so it's 3 hours in total. And I was like, the exact same things that I was reading in this book, I was watching play out on the screen. I was like, wow, okay, so if you aren't able to get hold of this book, I really recommend that documentary, because the kind of style and the things that Catherine focuses in this book were also reflected in that documentary. Obviously, she is particularly looking at the deaths of characters rather than the overall of the writing of all the plays, so this is more specific. But it was like, oh my God, I'm taking a break from this tone and now I'm getting the same tone of my documentary. I loved both of them. I thought they were great. So if you're not able to get a hold of this book and you want something that's kind of similar, I definitely recommend that 3-part documentary that the BBC have made. But Catherine, straight off, I applaud her for cramming in so much stuff in such a short space in this book, because she's not only, as I said, she's not only talking about the plays, she's talking about his life, she's talking about stuff that's going on in society, what London was like. There's so many different aspects, and there are so many things that she drops in, and I'm like, oh, I want to know more and more about that. Oh, please. So, if it's making me want to go off and find out more and explore more, then, I think that's great. So for example, she's talking about the Globe Theatre in 1599 here. So she says, south of the river, still out of reach of the city authorities, was a place where Elizabethan Londoners went for fun. Southwark was an area where theatres were generally located, among public gardens, bear-baiting arenas and taverns. It was also home for 100 brothels, or stews as they were known. There was a particularly close association between the house of ill repute and their neighbours, the playhouse. The Rose Theatre has been built on the site of a former brothel, hence its name, which was the Elizabethan slang for a prostitute. Things like that. I just love the fact that she's just throwing in all of this information. I never knew that before, that the Rose Theatre, the Rose is slang for a prostitute in Tudor time. I'm like, I love this. And there was a really, oh no, have I forgotten to mark it? Oh, I think I have, where she's talking about what it was like to go for a walk around London. If I can find it, I will read it. But it was basically talking about what was entertainment to people during that period, and it was very much, oh, let's go for a walk, and let's get up and we could maybe go see a hanging, and then we can go over the bridge and we can count all the spikes on heads, and that kind of thing, and then go off to the theatre. We might possibly get murdered, or we might get into a fight and such. It was just like crazy what it was like back then, to be able to have some fun and such. And so there are all different aspects of that which are included here, which I just absolutely loved. And like the murder rate in Tudor London was 10 times higher than it currently is. There was no police. There was nothing to stop anything from happening. It was dirty. It was full of disease. It was crammed full of people. Every possible thing that you could imagine happening happened. And so for a young writer who was coming into this world, who had lived in like the country, which took 3 days, Stratford-upon-Avon was a 3-day journey to London. For someone who has grown up in this country kind of environment to go into that like head first and having to deal with that must have been so crazy and triggered his imagination. And it's very interesting that Catherine talks about in this book, like his Shakespeare's daughter, one of his daughters, Judith, married a doctor. And if you actually look at his plays from the point where his daughter marries, there is almost like a scientific level information, to the degree that there's characters who have autopsies done on them, and he says explicitly in his plays what killed them. And having that coincide with the time when his daughter is getting married to a doctor, I thought, So you can see that Shakespeare is actually using the tools that he has available to him to be able to bring in to his plays, and for it to be very topical at the time. Obviously, like he did his history plays and such, and was able to talk about stuff, politics and everything of the time through his writing, but to actually talk about science through his writing, I found that really interesting. The more I read this, the more I was intrigued, and there were aspects of death in his plays that I'd never thought about before. And she even goes to the degree of going, okay, let's say this particular poison that he names, we think we know what it is, and actually breaks down the ingredients and what the side effects would be. And is he depicting that right in his plays? I loved all of those things. There is one reference to a death in one of his plays that is it's very close to my heart. I love it so much, and I think it's because it appears completely out of the blue. From a character that you wouldn't expect. And it is in a comedy as well. That's the thing about Shakespeare's deaths. So they appear absolutely everywhere. You have a load on the stage, you have a load of them off stage. And some of them, they just pop up in completely unexpected places. And the one that I love is in Much Ado About Nothing. And she very rarely talks about Much Ado About Nothing, because technically nobody dies in this play. But she does make a few references. But it's actually about grief and the impact of a death. And Lady Beatrice has basically just watched her cousin get engaged, and she's saying, oh, why, in standard English, I'm just going to sit in a corner calling for a husband, because there's no one around. I'm never going to marry. And the prince comes over and says, oh, I'll find your husband. And she's like, no. And he proposes, and she says no, and explains why. She said, look, I've been I was born to tell the truth. I can't lie. I'm not going to do that. I'm honest. I have to tell my thoughts, my feelings, my truth. And he says, "Oh, you were born of a merry hour," and she just goes, "No, my mother cried, but then there was a star danced, and unto that was I born." And it's a beautiful, quiet moment. And what she means is that in the process of her birth, that her mother cried when she was born and passed away. And the star dance is a shooting star. And, you know, that thing of shooting stars are souls going up to heaven. And it's a really beautiful moment. And I love Emma Thompson's delivery of that line in the film version of Much Ado About Nothing. Kenneth Branagh, Imelda Staunton, Brian Blessed, so many great actors are in that film version. I love it so much. The way Emma Thompson delivers that, and you could see tears in her eyes. It's so beautiful. And that's the thing, when you break down his life and look how it lapses over his plays, you can understand how death wasn't, to me, and I think I felt it from Catherine's writing as well, that even though death was more of a prominent thing back then, people believe that meant that they were numb to death, that they had no emotions around death. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. No matter what period of history that you live in, that you get the opportunity to live in, death is very tough and it's brutal. And I cannot, like when his son died, the fact that his son is called Hamlet and he has a play where he names the main character Hamlet after his son's death. How can you say that it's possible that he was emotionless about the loss of his son? I cannot fathom how some people believe that just because death was more prominent, that meant that they felt nothing because it was just so everyday and it was so constant. I do understand that there are some things that you would become numb to in a sense, but losing a child, losing a very close loved one, I can't see that as being a something that you would just go okay and just carry on about. That's not possible. So I really love the fact that Catherine looked at all different aspects of not just William's life, but generally in society and what was going on. She looks at it with heart, with emotion, but also from that scientific point of view to, you know, break stuff down. And she never ever forgets that not only were these characters that William wrote are fiction, they also feel very, very real. And I think that's what, perhaps that's why we keep going back to Shakespeare, that he makes his characters so real, so prominent. We can't see them as fictionalized characters. We can only see the true depth of a human soul behind them. And yeah, they are absolutely extraordinary. I loved the different chapters, the different groupings that Catherine did throughout this book. So as I said, you know, each chapter you've got a different type of death. So we've got so Our Humble Author, where we learn, she basically goes over Shakespeare's life. All the World's a Stage, where she's talking about what it was like being in that time and what was going on in the theatre. And then Will I Be Cured of This Infirmary? So illness, Off With His Head, executions, murder, the Dogs of War, A Plague on Both Your Houses, plague, you know, that kind of thing. the most delicious poison. I love that chapter title. So poisons, to be or not to be, suicide, and what excesses of grief the enemy to the living. So the power of grief and the impact. And it is interesting that as you go through Shakespeare's life, his books do get his books, what am I saying, plays get darker and darker and darker. It's very interesting. And the fact that everyone thinks of him as an Elizabethan playwright when actually his most popular plays are from the Jacobean period, so after Elizabeth's death. I find Shakespeare just so fascinating, so many different assets. And what Catherine did with this book, in a very short space of time, crammed in a lot of information in a really easy to read format, which I got hooked on. I thought it was great. As somebody who's not a science person, I was a little concerned that I might get a little bit lost, because looking at Catherine's work, she very much likes to look at science. So I was thinking, oh gosh, am I possibly gonna is this going to be a lot of in-depth science stuff that I'm not going to be able to necessarily connect to? No, that wasn't the case. When she does bring up science, she explains it, in just as with the rest of the book, in a very succinct manner that is very easy for you to understand. And so I really like that she brought in her science techniques and her science knowledge to this book, and made it such fun in a way. Well, fun is a really weird thing to say when you're reading a book about death, but a way that allowed me to completely understand, and it went in with the flow of the book and the style of the book, and in a way brought lightness to the darkness. And I really, really loved and appreciated that Catherine did that. It wasn't really heavy darkness, and so hard to read. I thought it was really, really interesting. And at the back, just so you know, she has got, before the index, she has got this appendix which gives you a summary of every single play and every single death and the type of death, as well as let you know when it was published. It's all in published order, and such. And yeah, and also includes the plays that are not included in the first folio, and the information that we know about those. So yeah, she has taken so much stuff, crammed it all together in a book that's only like 340 pages long. She's covered, what, 37 plays, the deaths about all of them, all of William's life, and also all of Tudor society life, and shoved it all together and looked at all the scientific aspects of all the various deaths and put it into a 320-page book. Hats off to her. I really, really enjoyed this book, I have to say. I think this was a really, really great read. It's so immersive. I loved every minute of it. I really, really did. Now, Catherine has written other books to do with, I think there's one it's something to do with, I'm going to have to confirm that. I'll probably put it in the description. I think it's called Science on Screen, talking about various different films, the stuff that they follow. Then there's a book just like this one of Shakespeare, but for Agatha Christie. And then there's one called The Science of Frankenstein. And really annoyingly, I cannot find either of those books on like Waterstones. It kind of, Amazon, cannot find them. I could find the audio books, so I think I'm going to have to go to World of Books to be able to get a secondhand copy to be able to read those. But yeah, definitely I think I'm going to have to check those out. So it's time for my usual questions. Would I read this again? Yes, definitely. I think this is a really, really good go-to non-fiction book about Shakespeare, an aspect of Shakespeare that it's so in depth that I've never really thought of before, that anyone can pick up, whether you're an avid reader or not, or just, you know, getting into Shakespeare and want to know some information about him, his life, his works. Really easy to read. Great book. I definitely recommend this. Would I read any more of her books? Well, yes, I've just mentioned I'm going to have to probably go to other books to be able to read her other ones, or listen to the audiobooks through Audible. What was I saying? I lost track of my questions. Would I read this again? Would I read any more? Would I recommend this to anyone? Well, I kind of, you know, mentioned that with the two combined. So yeah, definitely I would, for somebody who wants to read about an aspect of Shakespeare that they may not have read of or thought about before. So those are my thoughts on Death by Shakespeare by Catherine Harkup. Have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave comments in the comments box below. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, and tell me if you decide. And I have got another video which I have just filmed, which I'm very excited to share with you. And hopefully next time I won't be in my hoodie, because I will feel a bit warmer, because it is freezing cold today. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, you enjoy my next video, and I will be back with my thoughts on my next read, which is Alison Weir's Richard III and the Princes in the Tower. Alright guys, bye!